knows the roles that these guys play leading into it. And I think a lot of our storylines, a lot of our excitement is going to start coming out as you start to see the pre-fight documentary series that are going to come out on both HBO and Showtime. Look, these are two professionals. There's not going to be a lot of
Closer. We are making the rounds right here on ESPN.com. Jim Basketball alongside Brian Campbell. Dan Rafael will join us in a moment. Floyd and Manny step in the ring on May 2nd. Brian, what has your attention about a month out from this highly anticipated fight? There's attached to this fight. So what has your focus regarding this matchup?
Well, Jim, there's a couple of things. One is boxing related, and that is about the fact that I've read and heard and spoken to people a lot about the fact that Pacquiao and Freddie Roach don't deny that Manny's been having problems.
Kind of, Jim,
with
how
the
quiet on the set things have been. You know, the fight was announced. It was a big to-do, of course, for so many reasons. You even had that first news conference that was relatively anticlimactic. Yeah. Since then, not a lot to really work with. You've seen a lot of different internet rumors about how it's going to be.
Yeah, it's a good point, though. The fact that it's about a month out, and this is a mega fight, and we haven't felt the build-up yet.
This is the quiet right now before the storm. I think that will come down the stretch.
ESPN Boxing Insider Dan
Other guys are taking punishment. I'm not sure we can put a lot of belief or stock into all of that. But one thing's really interesting with this fight, and I think is the real hook for casual fans outside of how long it took for us to get here, is the hero and villain roles are so clearly defined in this.
Where they have tightened up on him, he's gotten cramps, and so he's been laying off his road work a little bit in the camp, doing all kinds of other stuff. So that's just something to kind of look out for. Perhaps an excuse down the line should he lose. Hopefully there won't be any excuse. Have something to keep an eye on. And on the boxing, on the business side of things, rather, we talked a lot about that financial stuff last week. But, you know, here we are a week later. They still haven't announced the price of the pay-per-view. They still haven't put on a specific ticket announcement plan. They still haven't announced a closed-circuit situation. There's still a lot of things
offensively that Floyd was just that much better, that he would have had that advantage. But what has happened in those 5 to 6 years? I think we all know that both of the fighters, you know, they've gotten a little bit older, and with that, they've lost, you know, there's been some slippage in sort of their strengths and where they stand. But for my money right now, I think Mayweather's slippage is more physical.
See this fight related to the promotion, and that's sort of surprising given that we're now getting pretty close to the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Manny's going to get that Gatorade in the system, Brian. Right? You know, I talked to Dan and I talked to you about these specific questions coming up for both of you. And tell me why Manny, Brian, this is for you, has a better shot now than he would have 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, what he does with the timing and the speed has slipped just a bit. Yeah. Where Manny, the slippage to me is more of the way he sets up for a fight and looks at it than necessarily the physically. And I think it's more of a transition of his mindset. He's not that hurricane offensive fighter that came into your face with reckless combinations that he might have been a few years ago.
Knockouts.
You know, you can reference, of course,
it's subtle. You really have to be someone that follows the boxing game to understand it with Floyd, because the average boxing fan might not pick
just enough to close that gap.
Absolutely. Dan, tell me why this has the potential of being a more memorable fight than it would have, say, 5 or 6 years ago.
Well, I think Brian touched on it a little bit, the fact that even though these two guys are still at the top of the game, you can't deny the fact that they're skilled.
You get the feel overall that from the time it was announced to the time they're going to step in the ring, it just seems like it all came together and it's rushed so quickly. It's upon us so fast.
But these guys are pros. If anyone's going to be in shape, year-round, top-level shape, it's these two fighters. I don't think that's going to affect
Fair enough. Floyd Manny, May 2nd, MGM Grand in Las Vegas. We'll have much more.
Whatever it is, we're seeing a Manny Pacquiao that's relying much more on boxing these days than being the puncher and being the guy who chases you down. And I don't think that his slip has been as much physically. I think that he's retained that top-end hand speed at 36 years old, gives him as good of a chance in the fight right now than he ever would have had. And I think that's going to be the key, because I've said a lot of times, when have we seen Floyd face a guy with this combination?
In their primes has eroded at least a little bit. And so at the highest level, if it erodes just a little bit, that may force them to stand closer a little bit longer than maybe they would have before, when the speed was ridiculous and Pacquiao's offense was unbelievable. But with just a tiny little bit of erosion, it might lend itself to a more fan-friendly fight. I also think that now that we're 5 or 6 years down the line, and their legacies are more clearly established now than they were 5 or 6 years ago, it becomes that much more of a big fight in each of their press conferences and all the different things that they're being asked about in interviews. But make absolutely no mistake, this is the legacy fight, period. And they know it, and they have the desire to win it more than probably any other fight they've ever been associated with. And I think that's going to mean that come fight night, they will have no choice, but they will have to let it all hang out if they want to win. And that could produce a better fight than I think some people think it might be. I hope that's the case. I can't wait. If they lay it on the line, we could get a